Hey everyone, my name is Dillon Gonzalez. I'm the editorial director for GeekVibesNation.com and also a co-host of the Home Dance Film Festival podcast. And welcome to the Video Attic. Things are a little bit different this week. This isn't a normal episode. This is a special episode because, as you might notice, my co-host Mike Bond is not here this week. They are taking a much-needed break for 1 week. They'll be back next week. But I didn't want to leave you in the lurch. I wanted to provide some new content. So I decided to do just like a special episode that I've been interested in doing. And I'm going to title this the International Release Roundup because I want to take you around the world to some international releases that have come out in like the past month or so, or coming up soon on the world of Blu-ray and 4K, or even one DVD. So I want to talk about some interesting titles that maybe might not be on your radar, but I think really should be. So I'm going to just take you on a international journey. So I'm going to start right off. I want to start with the Scream Factory release of Post Mortem. This is actually a Hungarian release. This was actually the Hungarian Best International Feature Submission at this year's Oscars, which is interesting because anyone who's familiar with the Oscars may know that horror is not a genre that normally gets nominated, so it's interesting that they would try with this one. But I can see why they did. I did really enjoy this one. This takes place in the waning days of the First World War. And in this tale, there's a soldier who is just very narrowly escaped death. And after getting out of the war, he starts taking on a very unusual occupation. He becomes a post-mortem photographer, which means that he gathers with families to pose recently deceased bodies with the living members of the family to take one last, memorialize one last moment with the family and the deceased relative. So they're kind of like, he's like artfully composing these pictures just for they can have a memento to like kind of say goodbye to their loved ones. But with this kind of comes some eeriness and some like ghostly tales. He is in particular drawn to this one village where there's like been a lot of disease and stuff where there's supposedly a lot of ghosts lurking around. So while he's in this village, a bunch of spooky things start happening, and he kind of develops this like relationship with this young girl, kind of becomes like his little partner, and they start investigating some of the weirdness going on around the town. That's kind of the bare bones of the plot. I will say this, like, it's like I said, it's submitted for like an Oscar consideration, and it might be thought of as more like a artsy horror film or like elevated horror, but I have to say this one really delivers when it comes to like the actual terror. There's a lot of good, like, they don't hold back on the ghosts, I'll say that. There's like a level of visual effects in this that I would expect more from like a Conjuring movie. I wouldn't say it's Conjuring in tone necessarily, but they don't hold back with ghosts. They really go for it, especially near the end, while still keeping kind of that more thoughtful, emotional take on ghost stories. So I think the acting's really good in this. The cinematography's really nice. I do see where there are some limitations within their special effects budget that they try to get out of it, but I think this is executed well enough that I would still highly recommend this, especially if you're looking for an atypical horror movie that maybe might not be on your radar, that I really think should be. And with Halloween season upon us, this is the perfect release. So this is from Scream Factory. The audio and visual looks really good, and there's some deleted scenes on here that are also kind of round out the package. So this one, it's a nice release from Hungary, from Scream Factory. It's a really interesting time. Moving on to Ukraine. This is kind of topical. This is from Welgo USA, and that is Sniper, the White Raven, which this came out a little bit earlier this year, and it involves, it kind of mirrors what's been going on throughout this year. This involves a Ukrainian teacher in this area of the Ukraine that's occupied by some Russian soldiers. I will note, this is also based on a true story, but I have not investigated like how closely to the facts it is hewn to, but it's based on a true story. It's based on a Ukrainian teacher. He's a pacifist living in this Russian-occupied territory, and then one day tragedy strikes and he loses people close to him thanks to some Russian soldiers, and kind of he revokes his pacifism and kind of joins the Ukrainian resistance to the Russians, and trains to become a sniper to kind of get revenge for his family. So it's kind of like a classic revenge tale, but rooted in kind of geopolitical politics right now and real world events. I will say that there's probably a little bit of like rah-rah nationalism and on the part of the Ukraine. Like, it's very clearly defined, like, Ukraine's the good guys, Russians are the bad guys, not much room for nuance. But for this particular story, I think it's well done. The movie is like really, like, the performances are good, the action's actually really like tense. It kind of reminded me in parts of kind of like American Sniper, which is also very jingoistic for the Americans, but it's not kind of to that level of like Clint Eastwood directing. But if you're looking for like a pretty black and white, well shot, well acted sniper drama, you could do worse than Sniper the White Raven. It is a very interesting movie. I think it did kind of make me feel emotional in certain points, and also like got my pulse racing during some of like the more tense scenes. So well go USA. I think they did a really nice job with this. The transfer is pretty solid. It's what you would expect from a newly released movie. There's not much in the way of special features. There's just like a trailer. There is an English language version in addition to the original language, but I will say stick with the original language. We always, pretty much all these releases, stick with the original language if there's an option. But Sniper the White Raven, it is a good release from Welcome USA. So I'll take a moment to say that most of this stuff I am saying off the top of my head. I do have some notes I can refer to. So, but if I say anything or take a moment to look down, just give me some leniency. I'm doing my best. But I'm going to go a little bit further into the past. We had 2 new releases going into the past, which oddly enough is part of the title. The Arrow video release of A Fugitive From The Past, which is from director Tomo Uchida, who people might know from Bloody Spear at Mount Fuji or The Mad Fox. If you're interested, I reviewed The Mad Fox for Geek Vibes Nation, and you can look up that review. Here's the booklet that comes with this. This is an epic in every sense of the word. I kind of didn't pay attention whenever I threw this on to see like how long this was actually going to be, and it's just a touch over 3 hours long, but don't be swayed away. We love long movies here, but this one does not leave you lacking. It is tense throughout. It's kind of set over like a decade-long period. It starts out in the middle of this national tsunami that is happening, and in the midst of kind of this tragedy in which like there's like a ship that goes down and all kinds of chaos is going on, there's a crime committed by like a trio of men that goes unsolved. But in the midst of like that crime, 2 of those 3 men end up dead and like discovered by the authorities, and no one ever really finds the 3rd man originally. We kind of follow that man on his journey to see how he got away, what happened, and then eventually what became of his life. So you kind of pick up with him 10 years later, where it's kind of like a situation where his past comes back to haunt him, and he has to kind of reconcile with what he has done in his past, and if it'll come to catch up with him. And through this, he meets some people, impacts their lives, maybe for the better, but maybe even that isn't enough to keep him from getting his comeuppance. It's a really morally like complex tale. It turns into kind of to like some investigative procedural elements that work really well. I was really impressed. And it's very entertaining throughout its 3 hours. It's paced very well. You get like an hour of like that initial setup. and then you kind of get like a slow evolution to just kind of see the different facets of it. It's really nice. So yeah, this is 3 hours long. It's from a high definition restoration that looks really good. Arrow Video never disappoints me. The audio sounds really good, and there's a pretty good number of special features. There are some scene-specific commentaries, so like not the entire 3-hour runtime, but there are various different historians that Arrow has brought in to kind of comment on specific moments throughout the movie, which really enhances it. You also got an introduction from a historian, Jasper Sharp, who kind of puts this into more perspective, and a couple other odds and ends, including like the booklet that I showed you earlier. So if you're a fan of these like classic Japanese movies, that Arrow has really been like giving us a lot of good ones over the past couple of years, I don't think you'll be disappointed, especially if you like the director's other works. This is like known as like one of his bigger like epics that you want to check out. So A Fugitive from the Past, this one highly recommended, so very good. Keeping things in Japan, becoming more modern. This was released last year, and this is from director Ryuzuki Hamaguchi, who people might know from Drive My Car, because it won Best Picture or Best International Feature earlier this year at the Oscars. This is Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy, his other movie from 2021, which was also a festival darling. This one didn't get quite as much hype as Drive My Car, which is a shame, because this one is also really good. I can understand why it's not didn't get the adoration as Drive My Car, but it's probably because of the structure, and that is because this one is just basically an anthology film with like Hamaguchi is exploring 3 different stories that kind of range from like 50 minutes to like 30 minutes or so. This is only like about 2 hours long. But there's just like kind of like 3 interconnected short films basically, where he kind of touches on some of the same themes but in different ways, of just kind of like unfulfilled desires and reckoning with the past, and just kind of different facets of that, which I think he handles really well in like a really interesting way. If you've seen any of his other work, be it Drive My Car or anything before these 2 films, like Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy or Drive My Car, you'll know that he like does a really nice job with like giving like very human moments to his characters that really ring very authentic, which I really love. And all 3 short parts of this film that make up this film are all very interesting. I didn't really find one necessarily heads and shoulders above the rest. I think the final stretch is probably the strongest, but it's all very like dialogue driven and very like dramatic in a way that I personally really respond to. So this is from Film Movement, and they did a nice job with this. They include a new interview with Hamaguchi. It is a 14-minute interview with Hamaguchi, and they also, Film Movement does something I really like, which is on a lot of their releases, they'll include short films, not necessarily from the director that is the movie that you're watching, but of kind of like similar themes. So there's another 14-minute bonus short film called The Chicken, which is also very interesting that you get on this. So if you were a fan of Drive My Car, or you're just wanting to explore more of Japanese cinema, I highly recommend Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy. Once again, going a little bit older, I'm going to Brazil for this one. And I'm going to Dona, Flor, and Her 2 Husbands. This time, once again from Film Movement, but this from Film Movement Classics. So this is a Brazilian film from the 70s. This was actually Golden Globe nominated for International Feature. Here we have a booklet, which is pretty great. And then we have this, the disc artwork and the inner artwork I'll show you. So yeah, this was from the 70s. It's kind of like a erotic comedy, and it kind of has like some vaguely supernatural elements, which I found pretty interesting. This is about a woman who she lived with an abusive husband who she like had a very passionate romantic relationship with, but he was also abusive and didn't treat her very well. And then one day he passes away, and she is glad to kind of be rid of his abusive tendencies, but she does kind of have that unfulfilled spark with inside her, because she's like bursting with sexual energy that's like unfulfilled. And then she does eventually meet someone else, but unfortunately this new person, while very nice to her and very like gentle with her, doesn't quite bring that spark to back like into her life that she needs. And then she starts kind of seeing a ghost version of her previous husband, and there's kind of like this weird love triangle between like the three of them, like the boring new husband who treats her well and like the ghostly vision of her older husband. So it's kind of like this woman reckoning with her romantic past and romantic present and what she wants out of life and like all the fulfillment that she wants. It's a very complex, layered, like often very funny movie that I think works really well. I know I'm saying a lot of these movies are really worth your time, but I got very lucky with a lot of these, and I did really like this one. So, Dona, Flor, and her two husbands. This comes from a new 4K restoration, and it looks really nice. It's still like some marks here and there, but this is like a really nice, well-resolved transfer. It also comes with a director commentary and then a behind-the-scenes featurette. So it has some nice special features. Film Mimic Classics did a really nice job with this. So if Brazilian cinema interests you, or the premise like as I described it interests you, I think it's worth it. It's from the 70s. There's some kind of like sexual politics things that don't quite hold up, but overall it's not too cringy or anything. I think it's really worth a watch. Moving on, this is set in Greece. It is a French production, but I believe the director is American. So this is He Who Must Die, from the great Jules Dassin, who people might know from the famous caper Rafifi, which is in the Criterion Collection. This is from Kino Classics, and no inner artwork, just normal disc art. So this one is an interesting film. This is, like I said, set in Greece, but it's in a Turkish occupied section of Greece. I think it's in the early 1920s, if I believe. Yeah, shortly after World War I. And in this particular town, the citizens are going to put on a passion play, kind of depicting the passion of the Christ, like that, his story. And within this town, various members are tasked with taking on specific roles, like acting in these roles. But in the midst of them performing, like getting ready to eventually perform this play, which is actually never shown, they start to inhabit various characteristics of the characters they are playing, be it like a Judas type character, or Mary Magdalene, or Jesus Christ himself. So all of this is in the context of some outsiders who are wanting to come in and like get like kind of be taken care of by the town and kind of seek refuge from the town. But then all of the Turkish occupied people who are like kind of comfortable in their power, they're wanting to keep them out. They're kind of outsiders. So it's kind of like a classic tale of like class resistance and like religious oppression and like geopolitical like conflict within this small community, which works out in some very like interesting ways, because drawing in all of like the passion elements, like, and how these characters kind of like their core values change based on who they are as their character. It's very layered and complex, and I do really like it. This one plays out really well, and I have to say, this Blu-ray, this wasn't really on my radar. I had heard of Jules Dassin, obviously, but I didn't know this specific movie about him, and I think it's kind of more as one of the under the radar type. But this Blu-ray from Kino Classics is bringing it back into the light. It's not a brand new transfer, but it looks really nice. I didn't notice any obvious like damage or anything like that. There's not like a lot of density fluctuation. It's just a really nice transfer. And it comes with an audio commentary from the film historian Daniel Kramer. Yeah, if you're a fan of this director, or that sounds interesting to you at all, Kino Classics has done a nice job. Keeping things on the political spectrum, this is a movie from earlier this year from IFC Films. This one's kind of a tough one, but I think it's really worth it if you're interested in it. This is set in Palestine. This is Huda's Salon. And so this one, like I said, it's from IFC Films, and it's loosely based on a true story. You can see, based on a true story. But this one kind of takes place in Bethlehem, and it's in like a region. Of course, there's the Iran and Palestinian conflict. I don't know. I didn't clock the exact year this was, but it's like kind of in a place where there is kind of that the two sides are pretty much in constant conflict. This one starts out really gnarly. It starts out with a woman going to get to her hair appointment to get like her hair kind of cut and trimmed and everything. She ends up being drugged, posed in very compromising ways, and having pictures taken of her. And then whenever she is awakened, she is confronted like with this fact that they have these pictures of her. They will blackmail her if she does not, if she chooses not to inform on like anything that she might see that could help the other political side. And that sets off kind of a chain of event where you learn that this salon, like this salon keeper, has been kind of set up to do this to a lot of women in the city. And just trying to see how this woman's place in the city, like how, because she's afraid, like if she tells her husband, he won't necessarily believe her. And if anyone finds out, like it'll basically be her end. So it's very tense how she's trying to navigate the situation. She's trying to figure out what she wants to like do to try to get out of this unscathed as much as possible. And it's incredibly tense. So it's very tough, but it's, like I said, it's very dramatically rewarding. And I think this is like probably one of my favorite ones that I've watched from this group. And it's not one I've heard a lot of people talking about. So Huda Salon, this Blu-ray is really nice. It's like I said, it's a brand new film, so it looks and sounds really good. And it also includes like a 10-minute making of featurette, which kind of like gives you some more background and kind of gives you additional context for this. So Huda Salon, it's a really intense, good movie from IFC Films. And I'm going to keep on the IFC Films train. So I know this is an international feature roundup, but I am including a few English language titles, and I will explain why. Especially this next one, also from IFC Films, Nitram, which is Australian. And yes, like Australia, they're allowed to submit for Best International Feature, so I might as well include their releases in here. But also, this is also very steeped in Australian like history, because this is a lightly fictionalized depiction of one of the worst, like the events leading up to one of the worst mass shootings in Australian history. I don't think that's like a spoiler going into it. If you even read a description, you'll learn about it. But they never say the actual person's name in this movie, because I think they're not trying to highlight this person's profile. And the movie is named Nitram, and this is a tragedy. I believe it happened in Port Arthur, but it's not really about that tragedy. It's kind of like the events leading up to that tragedy and how this young man got to this point. And it's basically Caleb Landry Jones, who people may know or remember from Get Out. He was kind of the terrible brother in Get Out. He plays kind of like a young man who's been pretty much from the beginning of his life like a little bit mentally unstable, mentally challenged, and kind of he develops this. He kind of has these. He doesn't know how to act in public. Basically, he doesn't know how to fit into society, and he forms this interesting relationship with this older kind of heiress, this recluse, who he becomes really close to, but eventually falls out of his life. And just kind of like seeing the struggle he has within, like trying to fit into society, fit in with his parents, who try to support him, but he's very much an abrasive figure in their life, and they're kind of at their wits' end as well, and just trying to see what led this young man to commit these senseless killings. And I will say, if you're sensitive to mass shootings, they set up to the shooting, and they set up to him about to commence it, but they don't go into the detail of showing him shooting people. So like that's kind of the context. Like that's my trigger warning, for the lack of a better word, for those who are sensitive to mass shootings. It doesn't show people getting shot, but it shows him leading up to it. So this movie, it's like I said, this is also very intense. It's kind of a slow burn, but if you're interested in that kind of character study, I think it's worth it. So Nitram from IFC Films. This one actually comes with a 29-minute piece that interviews kind of like some of the creative figures and the cast members, and they kind of give their insights into this, that I think is very rewarding as well. So Nitram from IFC Films. Now I'm going over to Indonesia with a really interesting action movie from Welga USA. It's Preman, The Silent Fury, which this one is, let me see, let me show you this cool disc artwork that I think is pretty cool. This one is a pretty solid action movie. It's about a man who, you can see here, he is what is formerly known as a pre-man, kind of just like a gangster type figure in this community. And he's trying to get out of the life, but he's like kind of still associated with those characters, until one day his son, his son witnesses like kind of the boss commit a murder, and it kind of sends them on the run with like people tracking them down. And also, I forgot to mention the Silent Fury part. This man is deaf, so that kind of adds like a layer of like intensity to him trying to like survey his surroundings and trying to survive and keep his son also alive. So this is basically a survival tale / action tale. You get some nice action like with this weapon right here. There's some really cool action scenes. I think the plot is pretty predictable. It's not really reinventing the wheel. I think the only notable like interesting element is the fact that this protagonist is deaf. But I think if you're in this type of mood and just wanting like some pretty nice action that's pretty like intense, I think you will have fun with this one. I just want to say like it's not reinventing the wheel, but it's some fairly nice like cool action, and the story is pretty like, it's obvious but good. Yeah, this one doesn't really have much in the way of special features. There is an English language version again with this one, but would not recommend it, but do what you want. And the audio visual quality is pretty solid. Other than that, there's just like a trailer and no other real special features. But if you're in this mood, well, you go to USA did a nice job. Continuing on back to Japan. My colleague Mike Vaughn, a few months ago, they talked about this movie, The Evil Dead Trap. And I watched it on their recommendation, and I really enjoyed it. It's a pretty gnarly movie. And now I saw that they were coming out with Hideki, Evil Dead Trap 2. So I had to check it out from Unearthed Films. And this one, I had to say, if you do like the first film, this is not like really connected to that one at all. Pretty much it takes kind of like a general sense like of tone and kind of evolves from that. There's like some very, very vague elements to it, but it's interesting on its own as well. This involves a young woman who she's a projectionist at a movie theater, and she starts to kind of realize that people who are around her start to end up dead, and she thinks that she might be killing people around her. But then there's also, she's in the like battling with some trauma that is deep within inside her that I won't specify, but there is some pretty tough trauma that she is dealing with, and she's kind of in the midst of this vague love triangle, because I will say like people on IMDb described her as like an unconventional protagonist, which means she's like not a classic beauty, and she's just a little portly, but like she's like a very interesting protagonist. And I think she but the reason I mention her looks at all is because she is kind of treated as like a side piece that is kind of viewed as kind of like a secret that needs to be hidden from this guy who is also dating one of her friends, who she's not a really good friend. But so it's kind of like a weird love triangle that this horrible dude is using her, and kind of all this stuff is kind of just wrapped up in trauma and just like murders, and it's just all of this is wrapped together in a really interesting way, I would say. It's not as good as the first film. It's not as bonkers as the first film, but if you're wanting a fairly layered, often beautiful, I will say the cinematography is actually pretty cool. There's like a shot near the end where there are two characters kind of coming face to face one another and like attacking one another, and it's in the midst of like some white sheets where like blood is like splattering the sheets that look really cool. I did really like that. This does have I think it's been restored. I would say it actually looks better than the first Evil Dead Trap. So if you've seen that one, this is an improvement, I would say. No, there's not as many special features. There's like a photo gallery and a mono and stereo option, which I wouldn't say is a special feature. But if you're a fan of this series, I think Unknown Films just making it available in the U.S. is a pretty good thing. Okay, now I'm gonna do back-to-back English language releases. These are both from Great Britain, so like, but I have my reasons. They're still international. They're not United States, but that's very centrist of me. This is from Greenwich Entertainment and Kino Lorber, and this is Ali and Ava. And one of the reasons I wanted to cover this one in this section is because this was actually nominated for a BAFTA for Best British Film. Excuse my language. And so this is very British, but it's a very interesting love story between these two people. They're kind of both saddled with their own baggage. The woman, she is like a relatively recent widow. She is a grandmother, but she's not really sure if she ever wants to kind of go into that kind of romantic direction again. Ali, he is technically still married, but his wife, like, they have also had their issues like that. I won't spoil, but they have kind of separated, but they're afraid to tell their families. So those are kind of like the two competing elements to their, like, obstacles to their potential love. But these two together, it really warms my heart. I think it's a really nice, like, love story. There's like a recurring song that I loved way before this movie that they use from Sylvan Esso it was great. I loved that edition, and it made me like really hyped for the movie. It's just a really straightforward, heartfelt romance between two unlikely people in Great Britain. It's nice. If you're in that type of mood, this is good. There's no real special features. There's trailers, which is not really a great special feature, but I do really wish this was released on Blu-ray. It really bums me out that it wasn't, but I did want to see this movie, so DVD is available if you want it, which I would recommend. Watch it somehow. Like, if you need to stream it in high definition, do it. If you want to own it, this DVD's, it's solid. It's not the worst. It's not the best. It's DVD. It's what it is. This next film, once again, very British, but it's because it's very British I wanted to talk about it. This is from Kino Classics. This is Dreamchild. This is about, it's a story about Lewis Carroll, who wrote Alice in Wonderland. But as it says, this is the true story of Alice in Wonderland. So it kind of gives you Lewis Carroll, not his real name. It kind of shows the woman who he based Alice on as an older woman coming to like a celebration of Lewis Carroll, like his 100th anniversary. Like, I think she's coming to America, but all this time as an old woman, she's reflecting back to her childhood whenever she was actually the inspiration for young Alice, which was in Alice in Wonderland, and kind of their special relationship and how it has been framed in her mind, and trying to find new layers with that in that relationship. This one is a little bit weird because it is based in the idea that basically the older gentleman played by Ian Holm, who many might know for the Lord of the Rings films, as Bilbo Baggins. He plays the Lewis Carroll figure, saying that his relationship with young Alice was inappropriate because of because she's a child, basically. But this movie frames it as like he was always young at heart, so there wasn't really anything wrong with their relationship, which I understand that, but also it's very creepy how he looks at her sometimes. And I think just shrugging it off as like him being childlike and nothing being like coming of it is a little bit of a cop out. And so I personally never could get completely on board with this like kind of recontextualizing of their relationship. There are charming moments. What I do really like is there are Jim Henson workshop creatures in this, which maybe you can see a little bit of here. So there's a lot of really cool creature effects, like Jim Henson Muppet effects, that are really cool, which I think are by far the most interesting part of the movie. There's also Peter Gallagher's in the movie as like a reporter, and his subplot with her, I think it's her niece, kind of doesn't really add much to the story. It's like a random romance. So this movie had a little bit too much ick factor for me, and also some randomness. But I did really like the Jim Henson Muppet effects. If you're a fan of this movie, if you don't have those hangups that I do, this is a good release. This comes with a new audio commentary from historian Lee Gambin, and it comes with a new interview piece reflecting on the older woman who plays the woman who inspired Alice, Coral Brown. So there's a interview piece reflecting on her. So the master is solid. I don't think it's like a new 2K or 4K restoration, but it's a solid master and it sounds good. So if you're a fan of this movie, Dreamchild, the release is good. I just personally, it's kind of a icky movie a little bit. Final release. This is one that I wanted to tackle because my colleague Mike Bond, they started covering this release a couple months ago, and I got through this release, and I kind of want to give my take on it since they still had a few movies to talk about. So this is the Miklós Jansko collection from Kino Classics. And this is a Hungarian release. I'm started with a Hungarian. I'm ending with a Hungarian release. And so they previously talked about the Roundup and the red and the white. So I want to talk about the Confrontation, Winter Wind, Red Psalm, and Electra, My Love. So those 4 films. I'll just go very quickly through these. So I don't want to jumble these in my head. So the Confrontation, that is about, it's set in kind of like a college where there's communism has recently come to power, and there's kind of like this really, all of these films are political in nature, which this director very much focused on. And all of these films are shot in very interesting ways. So these are like college students kind of confronting one another and debating. It's not my favorite of the set, but it is a really interesting, really good straightforward drama. Winter Wind, I really like this one. This takes place in 12 very long takes, which are like, his camera movement in this film is like on another level. It's pretty amazing. But this is kind of taking, viewing these citizens planning the assassination of this kind of leader who has been oppressing them, and trying to see all the different facets that are going into this planning. It's very layered. It's very interesting. I really like that one. Red Psalm, this one is pretty bonkers, but I loved it because of that. It kind of takes place all in one kind of field, where all these farmers, and I think it's like the 1890s, I believe, they are kind of like planning their rebellion against the political system, and it's kind of it's very lyrical and like flowing and musical almost. It's not a musical, but it's very musical, and it's like presentation. It's very inventive and very cool. I really liked it a lot. And then finally, Electra, My Love. Once again, this is another 12 take, like long take film. And this kind of tells the classic Greek myth. It's kind of recontextualizing it as Hungarian political, like weaving that into the classic Greek myth. So also not one of my absolute favorites, but like of these 6 films, I don't think there's like a sour one in the bunch. These are all from 4K restorations, and they all look really, really nice. So this is a highly recommended set. The first 2 films that were previously talked about come separately, if you want them that way. But I say spring for all 6 films because I really, really enjoyed this set. I had never really heard of this director before this set came out, and it blew me away. This is a really great set. So yes, all of these films, they're most like I just told you, they're very good, but they're all really worth checking out if any of them sound interesting to you. There's a lot of great film in international cinema that are really, don't overlook it just because there's subtitles necessitated on some of these. So thank you so much for bearing with me for going through this journey around the world in cinema. I had fun. I enjoyed watching all of these movies. But I do really look forward to my colleague Mike Vaughn joining me again next week. I love bouncing off of them. So we will be back again next week. If you did enjoy this, please give me some encouragement. Leave a comment, like the channel or like this video, subscribe. I probably won't be doing too many deep dive in the future alone, but we appreciate you watching the Video Addict. But until next time, thank you for watching.